Unit 2. Conditions and procedures for obtaining residence and/or work permits. This unit is designed to introduce you the procedures and condition for obtaining residence and/or work permits in Slovenia. After acquiring knowledge from this unit, you will have knowledge to make your learners qualified to inform and/or lead foreign citizens through the process of obtaining different types of temporary work and/or residence permits. Conditions. A national of EEA or Swiss Confederation needs to obtain resident permit in Republic of Slovenia for a stay longer than 3 months. The certificate of residence registration is obtained if the citizen has a valid identity card or a valid passport and if he intends to remain in Slovenia for one of the following reasons. For employment reasons. As a self-employed person or service provider. For studies or other forms of education. For the purpose of family reunion and other reasons. If he fulfills the conditions for issuing a residence registration certificate, the certificate shall be issued with a validity of 5 years or for the period of his intended stay in the Republic of Slovenia, if it is shorter. The application for residence registration may be renewed at his request under the same conditions as are those which are required for issuing it. Procedure. Citizen of EEA or Switzerland who wants to stay in Slovenia more than 3 months has to register his stay by filing the temporary residence permit application on the designated form, sample of the form. Documentation needed. In addition to the application for a temporary residence certificate, a foreigner must submit a valid identity card or a valid passport, as well as evidence of the purpose or reason of stay. Due to employment or work, a certificate from the employer that he will employ him or proof of employment or job performance when a foreigner is already employed or engaged in work. A self-employed person or service provider, proof of self-employment or proof that the foreigner is a service provider. For the purpose of studying or other forms of education, proof of admission to study or other form of education, sufficient means of subsistence. In determining the personal situation of an EEA citizen is taken into account, and these funds must not be lower than the level set for acquiring the right to a financial social assistance in accordance with the law governing social protection and adequate health insurance. A student's statement is sufficient proof of sufficient means of subsistence. Due to family reunification and other reasons, sufficient means of subsistence. In determining the personal situation of the EEA citizen and his family member is taken into account, these funds must not be lower than the level determined for the acquisition of the right to financial social assistance in accordance with the law which regulates social protection and adequate health insurance. Where to apply? The administrative unit in which the EU citizen resides is responsible for the issue of a residence registration certificate. Conditions. A single employment permit. The Employment Service of Slovenia shall issue a consent for employment if the following conditions are met. There is no adequate candidate in the register of unemployed persons. The employer who employs a foreigner is appropriately registered for the pursuit of an activity within which the foreigner will perform the work. The employer is not in the process of liquidation or bankruptcy. The employer actively operates, that is, at least one person is employed full-time and included in compulsory social security 6 months before the submission of the application, or the individual, sole proprietor, is included in compulsory social security at least 6 months before the application, or in each of the last 6 months prior to the submission of the application, there was an inflow from the pursuit of an activity of at least €10,000 to a transaction account opened in Slovenia. The employer has settled all tax liabilities. The foreigner fulfills the conditions required by the employer, and the employment contract has been signed. If an employer is registered for less than 6 months, before submitting the application for a single permit, he must invest at least €50,000 in an activity in which the foreigner will perform the work. B. Single permit for employment, self-employment or work. A single permit for employment, self-employment or work shall be issued to A foreigner who has at least a vocational education or a certificate of a national vocational qualification, NVQ, obtained in Slovenia and has been employed or self-employed in Slovenia for at least 20 months in the last 24 months. A foreigner who has been employed or self-employed in Slovenia for at least 30 months in the last 3 years prior to the submission of the application. A foreigner who has obtained at least a higher education in Slovenia in the last 2 years and who intends to obtain employment or work as a self-employed person. A foreigner who has completed a research program in Slovenia over the last 2 years. C. EU Blue Card. An EU Blue Card can be obtained if the following conditions are met. The foreigner has a valid travel document. The foreigner has at least a higher education, which is verified and approved by the Ministry of Education of the Republic of Slovenia. A contract of employment has been concluded for at least 1 year which provides a foreigner with a salary of 1.5 times the average annual gross salary in Slovenia. The employer is duly registered for the pursuit of an activity in which the foreigner will work. The employer is not in the process of bankruptcy or liquidation. The employer has settled all tax liabilities. The foreigner fulfills the conditions required by the employer. The foreigner has a regulated health insurance. The Employment Service of Slovenia issues a consent to the issuance of a blue card in which it states that there is no suitable Slovenian candidate for the job in their register of unemployed persons. D. Single seasonal work permit. A single seasonal work permit can be obtained if the following conditions are met. There is no suitable candidate in the register of unemployed persons for the position required. The employer or the contracting authority is duly registered, entered in the business register for the pursuit of the activity in which the foreigner will carry out the work, or he/she is entered in the register of agricultural holdings as an owner or a member of a farm. The employer or the contracting authority is not in the process of liquidation or bankruptcy. The employer or the contracting authority has settled all tax liabilities. The annual quota of authorizations for a single permit, which the Slovenian government may determine as a result of the limitation of the number of foreigners on the labor market, has not yet been achieved. An employment contract, employer, or a civil law contract, contracting authority, has been concluded. If a foreign worker performs seasonal work on the basis of a civil law contract, the Employment Service of Slovenia shall issue his consent without verifying the first condition, whether there are appropriate candidates in the register of unemployed persons. Procedure. An application for the issue or renewal of a single permit may be filed by a foreigner or his employer. Regardless of who submits an application, and where, the procedure is conducted by a competent administrative unit that obtains the consent of the Employment Service of the Republic of Slovenia before official authorization. If a foreigner fulfills all the statutory requirements, the administrative unit shall issue a single permit for residence and work in the form of a card. Documentation needed. Requests, forms are published in the Official Gazette of the Republic of Slovenia and on the website of the Employment Service of Slovenia, should be accompanied by the following supporting documents. A certified photocopy of a valid passport. B. Evidence of adequate health insurance. C. Proof of sufficient means of subsistence. D. An employment contract or a job. E. Certificate of no criminal record by the competent authority from the country of origin, not older than 3 months. F. Other evidence of the fulfillment of the conditions which are defined in the Foreigners Act for the issue of individual types of residence permits, and G. Other evidence of compliance with the conditions laid down by the Employment, Self-Employment and Work of Foreigners Act, for the purpose of granting consent. Additional required evidence for obtaining single permits. A single employment permit. The single permit application should be accompanied by the following proof of compliance with the condition for granting consent. A photograph of a foreigner or a reference number from an electronic clipboard of photographs. Evidence of the appropriate education or professional qualification of a foreigner or the fulfillment of other conditions required by the employer. A signed declaration by the employer, whether or not it guarantees accommodation of a foreigner. An employer's declaration and proof that he invested at least €50,000 in an activity in which the foreigner would work, before the application for a single permit was made, if the employer is registered less than 6 months. B. Single permit for employment, self-employment or work. The single permit application should be accompanied by the following proof of compliance with the condition for granting consent. A photograph of a foreigner or a reference number from an electronic clipboard of photographs. Proof of at least vocational education or acquired national vocational qualification, NVQ, in Slovenia, when issuing or renewing a permit to a foreigner with at least vocational education or acquired NVQ. Proof that the foreigner has obtained at least a higher education in the period of the last 2 years prior to the application in Slovenia, in the case of issuing or renewing a permit to a foreigner with a minimum of higher education. Proof that the foreigner has completed a research program in Slovenia in the last 2 years prior to the application in Slovenia, a certificate from the research organization on the completion of the research work, when issuing or extending a permit to a foreigner with a completed research program. An employment contract signed by the employer or another proof of the intended employment or self-employment, in the case of issuing or renewing a permit to a foreigner with a completed higher education degree or a foreigner with a completed research program. C. EU Blue Card. Application for a blue card shall be accompanied by the following additional supporting documents. A photograph of a foreigner or a reference number from an electronic clipboard of photographs. A contract of employment for the duration of at least 1 year, signed by the employer, in which the foreigner is guaranteed a salary of at least 1.5 average annual gross earnings in Slovenia, calculated on the basis of the average monthly gross earnings in Slovenia, most recently published in the Official Gazette of the RS. Evidence of appropriate education, decision or opinion of the competent authority in Slovenia for the recognition or evaluation of education. Proof of compliance with other conditions required by the employer. A signed statement by the employer, whether or not he will provide accommodation to a foreigner. D. Seasonal work permit. Application for a single permit must be accompanied by the following additional supporting documents. A photograph of a foreigner or a reference number from an electronic clipboard of photographs. A contract of employment signed by the employer, or a civil law contract signed by the contracting authority. Time frame: 1-3 months. Where to apply? An application for the issue of the first single permit is filed by a foreigner at the competent diplomatic mission or consulate of the Republic of Slovenia abroad, while an employer may submit an application for the issue of the first single permit to the competent diplomatic mission or consulate of the Republic of Slovenia abroad or to the competent administrative unit in Slovenia or via the EDM web portal. Costs, fees, prices. An administrative fee of €74.50, €4.50 per application and €70 for a single permit, is payable for the issue of a single permit. A foreigner pays another €12 for the issued card. There is no need for the consent of the Employment Service of Slovenia to issue or renew a single permit for self-employment. A foreigner can become self-employed after 1 year of continuous legal residence in Slovenia. The said condition of residence does not apply if the foreigner is entered in the business register as a person who will perform an independent professional activity. Similarly, the consent of the Employment Service of Slovenia is not required for the issue or extension of a single permit for sports coaches, professional athletes or private workers in sports, foreign correspondents or reporters for foreign media, foreigners who establish Slovenia's interest in the field of economy, education, science and culture, priests or persons engaging in religious activities within a registered religious community, as well as those organizing or conducting charitable and humanitarian activities within a recognized humanitarian organization or a registered religious community. Since regulations are changing rapidly, FDI advisors should check the data on the provided web pages, or directly contact the relevant stakeholders, before giving any information or starting the permit procedures for foreign investors.